for her to do other stuff. So we had to work on that. So there are different reasons you might select a behavior. In some cases, if I have a low skill or a low confidence teacher, I might pick the behavior that's going to be the easiest to change. Because what I want to do is go in and do something so that this teacher goes, wow, this shit works. And that I can actually begin to say, okay, now let's attack an issue that's a little bit more challenging, because this did work. We could see an impact very, very quickly on this kind of situation. And fortunately, many kids have low-hanging fruit behaviors, so you can deal with that. But you're going to select it, and you're going to find it. We've talked about this, and I just want to review this really quickly. FBAs and BIPs are the Achilles heel of most schools in a due process hearing. I will tell you right now, those of you who know the name Matt Cohen, the parent lawyer for going against, I will absolutely guarantee you one of the questions he asks any family member when he's talking to a family about going to a due process against the school is, does your child have an FBA and a BIP? If the answer to that is yes, the FBA and the BIP will be part of what we're concerned about in this lawsuit, in this due process hearing. We will make the mom, no, I'm happy. No, it's part of what we're going to look at. We're concerned. Okay? If the answer to the question is no, they will ask, does your child engage in behavior that impacts their learning of others? If the answer to that is yes, what should that child have? They should have a BIP. So now the issue is that they don't have a BIP, and they should have. How many kids do we have with special needs that probably don't have a behavior that impacts their learning of others? Okay? It's a large number of kids that should have these, unfortunately, and I'm not sure that was the design, but that's the outcome. That's what's happening. The number one reason these things get kicked out, and this is what we spent last time that I was here doing, is talking about defining the behavior. The number one reason these get kicked out in the due process hearing, again, is that we have a very poor operational definition of what our target behavior is. Okay. And again, just for the sake of argument, I'll tell you how this happens. If you would go to a due process hearing, the parents get to decide whether this is an open or a closed hearing. In an open hearing, that means that the people can observe other people testify. In a closed hearing, you cannot. The lawyer will generally tell the parents you want it to be a closed hearing, so people can't hear each other's testimony. All right? I now bring Olivia in and I say, Olivia, what was Randy's target behavior? And she goes, disruptive. Oh, what do you mean by disruptive? And Olivia tells me what she thinks disruptive means. And I thank her. And I say, Jamie, you work with Randy? What's his target behavior? She might not even give it the same label. She may say out of seat. Now, out of seat might have been one of the disruptive behaviors she talked about, but it wasn't the only behavior she talked about. Now, what do you mean by out of seat? And she tells me what she thinks out of seat means. And I go, Roland, you work with him in PE, right? Tell me about Randy. What's his target behavior? And he has another definition for disruptive behavior. What have I already done? I've already shown that this was an inappropriate functional assessment behavior intervention plan. These teachers don't even know what behavior they're working on, for God's sake. It's no wonder this plan didn't work. Okay? Now, we don't have these vague ideas of what the behavior is because we're nasty people. It's because we don't have time, and we don't spend the time actually saying, let's talk about it. What does it look like? All this kind of stuff. So, if this is an issue for you, I would assume one of those modules is probably the module we actually addressed this in, that you had gone through, because we did this last time, the time before last. Get that module, and there's a bunch of work on there on how to define a behavior. All right? Get your behavior defined well. Again, because that's the number one thing that gets picked out. Now I've got to ask myself, gee, what do I think the kid is doing that for? Now, you might, in the talking to get that operational definition, you talk to Terry's one of the teachers, and I talked to Mom, I talked to a couple other people, and I'm getting some sense of what may be happening. I think maybe this kid is doing this for adult attention. At least that's a possibility. It sounds like that. So I put together what I think the hypothesis is for this behavior. I then begin to ask myself, what questions would I have to answer? So that I could either say, yes, that does appear to be the function, or, you know what, I am not in the right ballpark. What questions would allow me to throw that hypothesis out and select a new hypothesis? What questions do I have, even if the hypothesis is panning out, that would tell me, what else do I need to know? What kind of things happened before? What occasions this behavior? What happens afterwards? What supports or maintains this behavior? What's going on around this? What are the questions I have to ask? And then, what does that tell me as to what data I need to collect? I'll go into schools and they're spending hours trying to analyze the data they have, not data they need. And they can't come up with anything. Why? Because they're not looking at any data that has any real practical possibilities of answering the question this behavior in this situation brings to bear. So they're putting time in and without putting thought in. So what I want you to do is to form small groups, 5, 6, 8 people, and we're going to have you read Janice. And I want you to do a couple of things. I want you to think about if Janice was in your school, this is one of the students in your bailiwick you're concerned about, what do you think might be the function of the behavior? And then I want you to seriously start thinking about what are the questions you have to ask to find out whether that's the right function and how things occasion it and support it. And then how exactly, and I want you to be as specific as possible, would you collect that data? Would I look in the file? Would I do an event recording, direct observation in certain kind of classrooms, certain situations? I want you to be as specific as you possibly can be. And then we're going to talk about that, okay? So take a little while, get in your groups, read through Janice, and I'll put Janice up here. Okay. All right. And again, when you're thinking about these, we talked just a little bit about this really quickly. Most functions are to gain something or to escape. All right, but you want to go a little bit deeper. So if it's to gain something, what exactly is the student trying to gain? All right, just to say they gain, they want something, well, then I'll give them something else. They want pure attention. Oh, well, then I'll give them a Jolly Rancher. That's not likely going to work. Okay? If they're trying to escape or avoid, what are they trying to escape or avoid? Okay. All right. So think about that data. People to do it. Go out and get a 120-minute tape, put it on record, put it up on your shelf. For the first 15 minutes, you are fully aware you're being recorded. And you're doing things like, good afternoon. You guys are all looking good. And you know that it's a fake because all the kids are going. Right? Most of us can't maintain it much beyond 15 or 20 minutes. And you start to fall into your normal patterns of teaching. Listen to yourself. It's a very powerful thing to do.
Working with hearing loss, oftentimes it's not the tone of their voice, but how loud they get, and that they don't realize that it's getting louder and louder and how some of the kids respond to that. So that might be one of the reasons she's taking off the hearing aid loudness.
I teach a class at UIC. Is lunch here?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I teach a class in a large lecture hall, like 145 or 200 people lecture hall. And then and most of the students in that class are social workers. And then every now and then I get asked to come up and do a presentation up in the social work department. And I was up there one day in one of the small seminar rooms, and I was doing my thing, and we were going through stuff, and one of my students come back and said, Dr. Van Acker, you have a great voice for a lecture hall. I must have just been in that little seminar room. So, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll finish up this, and then we're going to move into another set of data where we're actually going to try to interpret some data. And word completion, okay? Of those two, what would you do? What might you target? Both of them? One? Do both of them? Okay. You're efficient. All right, now, let me ask you this question. If you do two behaviors, in essence, how many functional assessments are you doing? Two. All right? Right off the bat, one of the things is as you write your report, your summary of your data, up until such time as you identify the function, if the function is the same function, but up until that point, you have got to be able to identify both behaviors all the way through. So you have to have both defined. And if you say, where does this occur? You have to talk about both of them where they occur. You talk about antecedents. What are the antecedents for both of them? Separately, I've got to be able to identify those independently throughout the report, or I have actually two reports. All right? if I just start looking at this as some kind of a conglomerate of this behavior, I don't know what the heck you're looking at. And what oftentimes happens is there a possibility that her being just rude and disrespectful is a different function than her not working on doing her work? Could those be two different functions? If I don't separate those out and they're two different functions, what's going to happen when I try to identify the function of this global behavior? It's going to be really murky, okay? So if I've got multiple behaviors, I've got to keep those multiple behaviors separate throughout the report. Now, if, let's say, by chance we think they all serve the same function, now they can become a response class. I can develop my behavior intervention plan for any of those behaviors because they serve the same function. So I could use the same intervention because it's a response class now. But up until that point, they have to be separated. If they don't serve the same function, they have to stay separate all the way through.
What happens if one is the escalation of another, but yet a different function? And I'm not even sure that this is true. But we have a child who has no social skills, and so really gets into other kid's space, personal space, thinking he's funny. But actually, what happens is he doesn't get the reaction that he wants, and therefore he seems to become upset, and then he escalates to aggression. But the aggression is more. The aggression seems to be more as a result of escaping the situation. So now we have what initially started out as attention for other students, but now we're trying to escape the situation, and we've escalated at some point to aggression.
Right.
So now you have attention and perhaps escape, but yet they're really connected.
So is that unusual? No, that's not even actually too unusual to see behaviors that are almost like a chain. This one leads to this one, leads to this one, leads to this one. In most cases, you're best advised to attack the front end of the chain. Okay? Only because if I answer this, I'm developing a skill and a plan that once I change this, the child may not need that skill and plan. So why am I spending time doing that if I can nip it in the bud in the front end? That's not always possible, but if I can, in that case, I mean, I would agree. Those are two distinctly different behaviors. All right. One is an issue of that I'm trying to somehow get peer affiliation, socially involved, whatever situation. The second is that when I get rejected, I don't know how to problem solve that issue. Now they're both social skill issues, but they're different problems that the kid is addressing. So
we're already into these are the target behaviors. So do we deal with them totally separately?
Yes.
As you just said.
Those would have to be dealt with because there is no reason to believe they serve the same function. They might, actually, but there's no reason to believe that until such time as your data supports that. So they have to be kept separate all the way through the document. Again, and this is always a problem with me, is that I realize that 99.9% of the FBAs and BIPs that we write, nobody's ever going to question. Right? But I only get called in when they've been questioned. So I tend to be a little bit more on, when you go to due process hearings, here's what you got to have. But so, you know, I'm a little bit of an alarmist. So just keep that in mind when you interpret what I'm saying.
Well, my situation is that I'm working with a child of someone who works with Mac. So, wait a minute, can you repeat that? Who works with Mac?
She said that she works with someone who works with the lawyer that I mentioned earlier. So, yeah, you know, it's always, I always figured that part of the issue for me too is the fact that when I do something, I would want, if it were my child, what would I want somebody doing for my child? So are they doing a good job? Are they being planned for and thinking about this kind of stuff? Not just because it's going to keep our butt out of trouble. It's the right thing to do. But frankly, if you don't have those together, you're not going to find a good answer, or you're likely to not find a good answer because you're going to start getting things murky, and that's just not the way to do it. If it would ever be challenged, I'll absolutely guarantee you they would click that together as two behaviors. I would say, why did you think these serve the same function? If you couldn't give me a solid answer, well, then you really went in with a preconceived, because you couldn't possibly have found this differently, could you? And I'm going to throw this out as not appropriately done. At the present time, in due process hearings, I think the number right now is 16. There have only been 16 FBAs and BIPs that have survived a due process hearing. For the most part, these are always deemed to have not been done with sufficient care, and the school loses on the functional assessment and behavior intervention plan. It's either the FBA wasn't done well or the BIP wasn't implemented well. One of those two things. Right? Why is it important for a parent lawyer to have something they win at? Because they will then, the school district will be on the hook to pay part of their salary. So it is very much in the lawyer's interest to find a really quick and easy thing they're going to likely win on. And the FBA and BIP is it. This is almost a guarantee because schools aren't set up to do this. This was imposed on us. We don't have, it's a tough issue. And stand up and speak really well.
This might be a little bit off topic, but with the dawn of ECIP and not being able to, like you're going through each section and it says this is student behavior, impact behavior, mothers and whatnot, and it gives you the option of saying yes, and then a choice between you can just continue to use regular classroom intervention or the BIP. And if you're in the meeting and suddenly it's determined that you need a BIP, then you can't finalize the IP, you can't do anything more with the IP. So you kind of end up creating the FBA and all that, right?
To be honest with you, I do not know because while I've sat through some of those, I've not sat through it and typed it in. My gut level would be that, and I'll just answer as though we're not the electronic, and you have to translate what the electronic means. You can complete the IEP in terms of the goals and all those kinds of things and say this child needs an FBA and a BIP. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to initiate the process. We will reconvene when that's done to implement the BIP and FBA.
You can say that, and you can, but you can't finalize the IEP and print it out and send it out.
Okay. Yeah, that may be something that you need to give feedback to the administrator of the process, because I quite honestly, you wouldn't be able to do it unless you anticipate it. That was the first time it kind of came up.
Well, it's one of those things where you have your pre-IEP meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If you have your pre-IEP meeting and you're like, okay, but if you don't and things come up at the meeting, and now
Yeah.
you're stuck.
My gut level would be, is that what it's at now? That's right, you'd be stuck. If you can't, if electronically it won't let you do that, you'd probably be stuck and to say, we'll have to reconvene when we have this done. That's crazy. But I mean, there's lots of crazy things that happen until things get fixed when it's electronic and debugged. I would, but it's not unusual that in an IEP meeting, something will surface to say, gee, we really have to have a better behavior intervention plan. It may come out of the fact that you think you've got one, and as you start talking, it really isn't that satisfactory. Or it's too difficult to do. There will be times where I'll go in and for example, oftentimes, one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine is I'll go into classrooms, and say that we've got some sort of a reinforcement program for students for being engaged on task. And we'll listen to the IEP and the person, and the psychologist back here has talked to us about how long this child has got some memory problems and retention issues, and probably the attention span is around maybe 18 minutes. And the class is a 45-minute or a 50-minute class. And you're going to reinforce the child if he was on task during the class. All right? If the kid can retain information for about 18 minutes, you're reinforcing on 45 minutes. What does that mean when you give the reinforcer to the kid? They have no clue what the hell this is all about, because they can't hold that much time in their head as to, did I do a good job? And so it becomes, well, why did you? Well, because it's easy for us to reinforce at the end of each class period. All right? So we developed a behavior intervention plan that fits nicely for us and has no validity for the student. All right? Now that happens a lot of times, and maybe in the meeting we'll say, oh, God, we didn't mean to do that, but as we're looking at what's going on, there's some information that's surfaced that as we bring this together, this really doesn't look like it's going to be a very good plan. Okay? Or we've got a plan where we're going to do something where, let's say it's a situation where maybe it's talk outs, and I've got some kind of a number of stars. I take a star away each time the kid talks out, and there's any left at the end, it means something good. And then we realize this kid doesn't really even have one-to-one correspondence. Okay? Some of that may be just magical to this kid, and so we've got to rethink this plan. And that comes up sometimes, so you just have to stop. Or all of a sudden the parents will say, I would really like to have a behavior intervention plan. As you're talking, thinking, yeah, this kid really needs it. The other one that I see a lot are kids with ADHD, and you'll have a goal for organization. will come to class with his materials and be organized 8 out of 10 times for 5 consecutive weeks, right? Blah, 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 blah. And I'll ask the question, what are we doing to teach organization? Okay, I can't just have a goal and say, geez, you're doing it or you're not doing it. What are we actually doing to teach the strategies to be organized? Oh, God, well, we better build a plan for that. So that can happen.
That a lawyer working with the parents can find a real problem with the FDA and the BIP that the school district then loses?
They'll lose on that. They won't lose the whole hearing.
Okay.
All right, so there might be 20 things that they're bringing up.
Okay.
All right, you violated procedural things because I didn't get the 10-day notice. The FBA and the BIP is inappropriately designed and executed. And here the parents have to identify what are their concerns that brings them to process hearing. Right, and they'll try to get a mediator to come through and clear it up and all this kind of stuff. But if that doesn't happen, and the FBA and the BIP is just such an easy, you didn't do it. I mean, and it becomes, it's really quite fun to watch this if you get from a distance standpoint. You can keep, I mean, I'll bring the teachers in and say, tell me about, I just did this, what are you going to do? Well, now we do this, what are you going to do? And what I find is that, gosh, you know what? They're responding differently. Well, this doesn't sound like a plan to me. This sounds like kind of an idiosyncratic, everybody just does what they want to do when this kid misbehaves. I don't see any systematic plan here implemented. Gosh. And it certainly doesn't seem to match up with this thing that we've got here that we call a behavior intervention plan. Now think about your schools. How good are teachers at implementing behavior intervention planning? We suck at this. Okay, in most cases. We even to be able to tell you what it is, much less to execute it well. And so the other thing is you don't want a ton of these. Right? You like to keep a number of these down. Now that's the one thing, quite frankly, where schools that go into like behavioral interventions, positive behavioral interventions and supports and some of those kinds of things are very helpful. Because the more systemic stuff I've got to take care of this, the fewer kids bubble to the top. All right, they have to have these individualized plans. But if I've got it, it's there. And it's just a real easy thing. So they'll lose that piece. That means at least part of their salary is going to be paid by the school district. I'd want that too if I were looking for, if I was the parent's lawyer. All right? So, go ahead, guys.
I'm still thinking about what you're saying, because in a way then it sometimes seems that it could set a school district up for failure, because I could write a really good bid, but now I get to have, the 7 teachers at the kids' leagues, throughout his high school day, and the interpreters and the staff aides follow that, and if there's a leak in the system somewhere, that would be really easy for a parent to jump on that.
Sure, it is. Yep. Now I'll tell you something else. Just listen to what you say. If I were the parent's lawyer, I'd say, excuse me, who wrote the bid? And how was this bid developed? But tell me about how this was developed. What are you saying you know too? I'm sorry, I moved and I shouldn't be moving. I can't move.
I feel like I understand the whole concept of it. I think it's wonderful for the staff to sit together, especially when you have a kid that has so many different behaviors and you can't figure out exactly what they are, or which ones are the most disruptive, and which ones interfere with that kid's learning and everybody else's, or which ones are the most dangerous. So I think to have a consensus of, okay, everybody, what do we need to work on? Why do you think the kid's doing it? What can we do to help this kid? Mom's been calling every day. Let's get mom in here, and you can develop this great plan in that room. This is like our kids. As soon as they leave that room, it can all go to hell if you don't have everybody following it all the time. And that same parent that wants your help could be that same parent that's going to take you to court if the kid isn't doing as well as they think they should be doing.
No.
So, in some senses, I mean,
It's like anything else we do. I mean, again, part of what am I doing the best job I can? Am I trying to make this work? I think sometimes, you're talking about the scientifically based, and I think one of the other sides that we have to get into is we have to be much better at developing plans that are executable. That fit with the school. Sometimes our plans don't fit the schools very well at all. And all those play into, is this the right placement? I think sometimes that's got to be a much more serious question asked than we're asking. sometimes, can this be executed realistically in this kind of a situation? That at least and if not, then can we develop a plan that can be? And it may not be the best plan. This may, I'd rather do this, but you know what? We can't really do that, but we could do this. Let's give this a shot. It's got a good chance of being successful. There's lots of reasons that these fall apart. One of the things to me where this plays out is the fact that, just like you made the comment about what we still come into most things where people go, I've got a kid who's non-compliant. What do I do? I've got a kid who hits. What do I do? I've got a kid who's using cyberbullying. What do I do? One of the things by working with the team, and one of the reasons that we want the team to be involved, is what I really want is for people to stop asking that question and start, I can build you a better plan. I don't want to know the behavior. You come and tell me I've got a kid doing something for peer affiliation. I can build you a better plan with more chance of success without any idea what the hell the behavior is than if you tell me the behavior without the function. And part of why we want the team to be involved in this is because if we can get teachers thinking that way, we would have less FBAs and BIPs to do. So we really want, the other side of it is the fact that as we sit down, like the questions you asked yourselves, so some of you I'm sure are going to be talking about, gee, I wonder what's going on at home. One of the things for me in the team is that oftentimes how I get people involved is by saying, who has the best relationship with mom and dad? Good. You're doing the interview with mom and dad. We need to talk to Janice. Who here has probably got the best relationship with Janice? Great. You're talking to Janice. All right? We've got to look at this creative writing class. What the hell is going on in that class that's so different? Who's free fourth period? Good. You're doing fourth period. And I get my team members involved in that, because if I develop a plan, I have to come in and sell it. Now it's not only dependent on did I get good information, now I've got to convince you this is what you should do. There are times I've actually said, Jamie, I want you to go into Olivia's classroom and watch Janice. You might be Janice's teacher too. Let's say that Olivia here is the freed-up writing teacher. And why I want is because part of the thing is that the first thing you look for, if I was going to put dollars on a bet, I have actually told principals when I go in to do consulting, if I know the principal really well, I'll oftentimes say, I'll tell you what, we go in the classroom, the first comment the teacher makes to the kid is a positive. I will do this consultation. If, on the other hand, the first comment the teacher makes to the student is a negative, you pay me twice my daily rate. What do you think? Okay. Now, Janice is doing plenty of things to get negative comments. What are you choosing to target initially? All of those things. So maybe I just want you to see how she sets this kid up. I'm going to send you in to collect data. I'm not even all that concerned about the data right now. I just want, you're going to see things that I could never talk to you about. But when you go in and watch, you'll see. And so it becomes part of an education process as well as anything else. So there are lots of different reasons that you might want to make that team involved in what's going on. Make sense? All right, so you've got two target behaviors. They have to keep them separate. What questions did you have? What information did you have to try to understand why she's being disruptive and distracting, getting not getting work done? Yes?
What's going on at home?
Okay. Want to know what's going on at home? Well, how would you find that out?
Home visit.
Do a home visit.
We talked about including the social worker and on like a plan to visit home or call home. It seems like it's going to be on the teacher now. The parents aren't calling with that.
Okay. So you've made some appeals, and it's not worked. So somehow we're going to have to get the parents. Why might the parents not be responding?
Some new issue. Some kind of new issue.
Something could be going on. Maybe they get a divorce. There could be something going on. What's the other reason that the parent may not respond? Do we ever get parents who don't respond to us?
Yeah.
They think that school is their business.
All right. You might be it's things I'm not concerned about.
They don't want to hear any more bad news.
That's a real big one. I've got caller ID. I have not heard much lately of anybody calling about my daughter doing well. This is one more person that's going to start bitching about how my kid's behaving, like it's my problem. And quite frankly, I don't know why Janice is doing this either. All right? I certainly don't want her going out of the house looking grungy. I certainly don't want. I'm as stumped as anybody else. I don't know what's going on, but I'm feeling very blamed in this process. And so I might be avoiding your calls because I too am feeling pretty incompetent.
We have to take into consideration that the student may be deleting the messages, but parents aren't getting them
Could
also.
be, all right? Who else besides the parents could tell me about what's going on at home? Teacher might know. Janice. Anybody want to talk about Janice? Okay. What other things might you want to look at to get a sense of what might be going on at home?
If you, like, her old peers that she's not kind of avoiding, if you have a relationship with them.
Why don't you stand up? Okay.
I was saying, I guess this is the teacher's point of view. If the teacher has a relationship with her old peer group and her current new peer group, if she has a relationship with either one, she can ask either one about Janice or if they know anything about home.
Okay. All right. And that's a little bit sticky sometimes because there's a confidentiality kinds of issues that get involved there when you start doing that. But we can certainly be talking with the peers about what's going on, what's happening. I might want to get a sense of what are these guys doing and what are these guys doing. And I may not make it direct, tell me about Janice and what you know about Janice, but I might, what's going on? What have you guys been doing lately? Just get a sense of listening a little more carefully about what kind of activities, what seems to be happening in terms of what's happening here. I might want to see if I can hear them talk about Janice at all and what's going on. All right? And Paul?
See which peers are in each class to see if there's an overlap, if she's trying to show off for some, or, you know.
Okay. So you mentioned the fact that the classes are different. Gee, does creative writing have a whole different group of students, and all of a sudden there's not a peer group that I have to perform for? That because they're all the nerds, and I can be a nerd in the nerd class, but in the regular class I've got to look cool. All right. Is there something going on there? What else might creative writing provide you? Yeah, I might actually want to talk to the creative writing teacher not only about but I might want to, what's she writing about? Is there stuff that's being, are we seeing a change in what she seems to be writing about? It looks like this kid's going through some sort of a metamorphosis. All right? What's that all about? Are we getting any hints to that? Can I get it from Janice? Can I get it from Mom and Dad? Can I get it from teachers? Can I get it from her writing?
We were saying maybe even set up an assignment that would lend her to write more of what you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I might set a situation. And one of the things that we were talking about, I'm getting too close to something. Somebody who's a technologist will tell me what I do to make that happen. Oftentimes we'll do things like, let's say I've got, you're talking about cyberbullying or bullying in general. I will oftentimes bring materials into the class that will talk about the issue that's a text or a book. You can go to most major libraries' bibliotherapy index. I can look up the topic. And now we're going to have a class discussion about it, and we're not talking about Janice. We're talking about just some kid, what is that like, what's that all about? And so all of a sudden, be able to breach a topic, it might be too sensitive if I just try to talk to the kid directly about it. But having brought it up, the child may then come and seek out somebody to talk about it. All right? What other questions did you see? What other concerns did you have? Things you want to collect data about? Questions on how you answer? Yeah.
I'd be concerned, if,
Stand up, please, and roll up.
how many other students, have IEPs in the class? How many other students have a hearing loss?
Okay. What?
Well, if she's the only one, that changes the dynamics a little bit in terms of communications. If there's multiple kids, is the special ed kids considered the nerds and the other kids seem cool and some of those kinds of issues.
Okay. So there seems to be some kind of an issue here with her aids or her hearing aids, not wanting to wear them because they make her look different. What can we figure out about that? What, and how might we, so one thing you might want to look about is she the only one? Does this truly make her look different because there really are no other kids there? Okay?
We talked about more of the
Stand up, please, and real up.
We talked about the creative writing class. Is she mainstream? Is there an interpreter in that class that she connects with or provides better interpretations of the instruction versus the other class?
Okay?
What's the setup?
So look at the classroom for directly in terms of what kind of supports are there provided to this student. Right? Know what you're saying? Okay? Other questions, and how would you go at it? Yes? Stand up, please.
In the observation, you really need to see when she's becoming defiant, rude, what is happening at that time and documenting that. And when that's not happening, she's doing maybe some less work or what's
get that? How would you capture information related to what kind of things trigger her being defined? How would you actually get that? Somebody said something. All right, say that loudly.
An ABC.
And what's an ABC chart?
Antecedents, behaviors, and consequences.
Okay, everybody's familiar with that? Okay, so that might be a really good way to at least get some beginning on this. Now, the other thing is that, is it just the words that make a difference in what somebody says? Tone of voice, all that kind of stuff. So the other thing is make sure that when you're recording it and writing about stuff, that you're writing about the things that seem to be significant here. My daughter and I are cut from the same cloth entirely. I mean, and what I don't like about me, I don't like about her. And one of the things that we either are having a love fest or we are like doing this kind of a thing. My daughter's 25 now. She's actually going back for her master's in special education. It's like scary. But one of the things that we find we do is that we use a tone of voice with each other that we are not aware we're using. So it'll be things like she's eating, we were at Olive Garden one time, and she got some kind of a, because she's this vegetarian nonsense. And so she was doing this thing, and she'd eaten all but one thing. I said, did you even eat any of it? And anyhow, I guess I had kind of a pep to my tone. And she reacted, and I reacted to her reacting, and she said, I said, what's the matter? She said, well, you were being very, I said, I was not. And my wife was sitting across the table, she said, yes, you were. And it kind of opened up an aha for us. And so now we can, like, is that the tone? Are you aware of the tone? Okay, let's check the tone here. But I'm not aware that I do it. She's not aware that she does it until sometimes we check this kind of stuff. So sometimes that can play a big issue in terms of how kids trigger. How you get across that. Now, what might be, you were talking, Carmine, about how do you get with a teacher? How do you deal with a teacher around some of that kind of stuff? Let's say I've got a teacher who's got this kind of very sharp voice, can come across kind of maybe more accusatory than I think the teacher may even want to be coming across. What might you want to do in a situation like that as you're collecting data?
Can you ask that one more time?
Yeah. Let's say I go into a classroom, I'm observing. One of the things, let's say Carmine's the teacher. I'll pick on Carmine over there, okay? And as I watch Carmine, when this child is not engaged, because over here she's kind of playing for the peers a little bit, she's not being too cool. When he comes over, he's got like an edge to his voice when he kind of reprimands her. And she seems to be reacting to the edge in his voice. All right? Her behaviors of concern. All right? One is clearly, yeah, he's not wearing his hearing aids. All right? Thank you. All right? So that could be a target behavior, couldn't it? What other target behavior might you see here with this young man? Non-compliance. What else? Anything? Tantruming. Okay, the whole tantruming behavior. All right, and the shutting down as that escalates. All right. So again, just like any other child that you're probably working with, there's numerous behaviors you could target, and all of them may play a role in terms of what's going on. All right. Anything else in here that you think might be important to note? Okay, as I played with it, all right. Becomes upset when asked to initiate an academic task or when he doesn't do well. As you look at this information, you have just this, what might you think the function of his tantruming behavior would be? All right, escape or avoidance, okay? What might be the function of his not wearing his hearing aids? Okay. Yeah, he might actually be directly being reinforced, but these aren't important. Okay? All right. So she doesn't like him, this kind of situation. So it may be a situation where, again, it could be escape or avoidance, and there's no reason for me to wear these. He's making it look, less attractive, whatever the situation might be. They're not important. All right. So some of the things we learned are conductive hearing loss, recent immigrant to the U.S., Spanish in the home, letter sound problems. So we know that he's got some. Is this going to impact learning? Yeah, reading, understanding language, all those kinds of things going to be a problem? Absolutely. All right. Students who doesn't like hearing aids, not wearing consistently at home. Task initiation is often a problem. All right. Academic and behavioral issues in terms of what's going on. Tantrum, shutdown, noncompliance. All right, how about the scatter plot? People know how to read this? Okay, so basically you've got different days of the week, you've got different classes, and how many times you display the tantrum and behavior. That's what they decide to target. Anything you pick up on this sheet? Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of interesting that he did not display any disruptive behaviors in math class all week. He only had one incident in art, music, and PE, and of course, lunch and free time and stuff like that. But science, he only melted down one time.
Okay.
Yet later on, when we talk about the behavior thing, they said it was in all academic classes.
All right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting that clearly there's a pattern of him breaking down and reading and language arts, but it was, spelling. So it seemed like those four classes.
All right. Anything those classes share in combination? Language, right? Okay. Why would science not be as big a problem? All right, might be more hands-on and actual visual. If it's a hands-on, I can actually watch what's going on and probably make more sense out of it than if I could necessarily. Although as that progresses, science will become more of a problem because science becomes more language-based as we move on. Art, music, PE, again, depending on what's going on, may or may not be as big a problem in terms of what's happening. Okay? If you were going to observe, where were you going to observe this kid? Okay, anywhere else? Music and science. I might want to see what's different about this. Why is he doing so much better, and just to confirm what's going on. So I might want to, well, actually one of the beauties of the scatter plot really is because most of us do not have just all kinds of time on our hands. And so by asking the teacher, this is one of the few things I actually ask the classroom teacher to do, is to complete a scatter plot. And again, oftentimes what I'll do, I've showed this before, is this is my major data collection system. I carry change in my pocket. And so if I were doing this, I might say, okay, during daily oral language, as you're teaching, if you have a problem, you move a coin from one pocket to the other. Nobody has to know I'm even taking data here. If you have in the class, I pull out 6 coins, put down 6 on a little piece of paper, shoot it down at the end. But I want to have some sense of how often is this happening where. So when I have to decide what do I want to observe, this will tell me when am I most likely going to see what I'm looking for. I don't have time to spend all day with this kid.
One of the problems that I have is, like you have 2 episodes. Does somebody have to define what an episode is and when one episode ends and when another one begins? Because a lot of times I'll say, so we have to define an episode. And how do you know if one isn't a continuation of the first episode? And so typically what I do is we give a time limit. If, we look at all the data that we have so far and say, okay, if it's, if it's after 15 minutes of cooperative, then it's a new episode. I mean, is there any sort of rule?
Again, it depends on the behavior. So let's say I'm worried about swearing, all right, or talk back, disruptive. I say, you know what this is? This sucks. I'm not doing this shit. I hate math class. Dumbass. How many swear words did I engage in? Absolutely. Some people will go, that's one. That was one episode. Others are going, oh, piece of dumb, piece of that, piece of 9. Okay, and that was one right, one wrong. Or if I ask you, like, I do a lot of things in class in terms of rocking. I want you to count how many times I rock. Okay? And I'll start doing. How many times did I rock? You didn't count, did you? Okay? Some people might say, well, yeah, you rocked 19 times. Others might say, well, you rocked 3 times. Right? Is this 1, 2, 3, 4? Is 1? 1? It's not like God's going to come down and say, this is the right answer. What you just got to do is agree. Because if I send her into science class and she's going 1, 2, 3, 4, she's going to come out and go, he rocked 93 times in science. All right? Linda goes, and she comes out and says, well, in math I only did 45. All right? And we've got Terry down here who goes, he only did 2. Right? Same behavior, it's just how they counted it. So that's called a response definition. And if your operational definition does not have a clear ending and beginning, you need to indicate what the response definition will be. And the response definition gives you the count of 1. When do I say the behavior happened one time? So I sometimes, for talk back or swearing, I'll say there's got to be at least a 30-second break That doesn't sound like a lot of time, but 30 seconds is a long time. You give me a 30-second break, it is a new episode. All right? So if I say math sucks, 30 seconds later I go, you know, I'm not doing this shit. All right? That's 2. All right? If I say math sucks, I'm not doing this shit, that's 1. It's not like one's right and one's wrong. It's just you've got to all agree on it. Okay? So good point. Yeah.
I'd like to know what's going on at home Tuesday night or after school, or what's going on Wednesday at school, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe
Okay.
spelling
So-
tests or out loud reading on Wednesdays, or Tuesday night he goes to soccer and moms at work, I don't know. But
All right.
it's like Wednesday's significantly higher than the
Okay.
other 4.
So there might be a day of the week kind of a thing going on here, all right? And there may be, and that's one of the things you're looking for. So you start looking for similarities, you start looking for things that might help, and that, at worst case scenario, it tells you when you might want to start observing, looking at what's going on. At best, it gives you some insights, okay? So if we look at this particular piece, some of the things we might find, okay, is that greater problems in language-based academic areas, few problems when not engaged academically, like lunch and those kinds of things. There's no pattern by days of the week, although there actually was, or time of the day is readily apparent, although periods that it does. And there's a range across days. All right. How about this first ARC, or ABC? This is the one with Mr. Alvarez, or Ms. Alvarez, in which he's doing pretty well. What do you see on this one? Okay, yeah.
First thing he did, he described it as the positive reinforcement of people who are hearing aided, you get to beat cancer.
Okay. So it's kind of if then at least makes a little bit of sense at least sometimes. It might be so that's good to know, right? Okay. And again, when you're in there taking the data, remember we're doing this to build a plan. So as you see things that look like they could be utilized in the plan, very good to note those. All right. You see stuff that's making sense because you're only doing it. I'll see people spend an incredible amount of time doing this really nice functional assessment, then rush to the behavior plan. You don't do this for the functional assessment. You do it for the behavior plan. The functional assessment is supposed to inform the behavior plan. That's where you want to put your real energy. But as you're collecting data, you might find some information out. What else are we seeing in this ARC? Yeah.
The approach of the teacher. The approach of the teacher doesn't say, Ms. Alvarez, because he wasn't wearing his hearing aids, he didn't say, wear your hearing aids, why aren't you wearing your hearing aids? He didn't yell at him. He said, oh, if you put your hearing aids on, then you beat the cancer. So it was more positively phrased than yelling at him.
Okay. So the kids seem to respond, and the teacher seemed positive, right? All right.
Then once he was corrected, he shut down and couldn't get back. He continued to be positive. It didn't matter. He was shut down and you can't get him back from that. So he responded positively, but it's negative, the reprimand, he completely shut down and couldn't get him back.
Do we have kids who are really, really sensitive to negative comments, to failure, or to some sort of issue of less than being competent? Absolutely. Okay. So as we whip through this one, we see things like not wearing hearing aids, willing to attempt responding. I think that's one of the things I oftentimes look for is, does this kid volunteer? Does this kid readily try to engage in this task at hand? And one of the reasons I do that is because oftentimes that can be a very, very powerful way to stop, especially the resistive teacher. It's like the kid still wants to play the game called school. He's still volunteering. He's still trying to engage in things. This is a great thing. I'll go in and I'll have kids in 5th, 6th grades who don't. And that's a much tougher issue. Now I've got to find some way to really get this kid to be willing to risk again because we pretty much beat it out of them. So anytime I see that they're willing to do it, I always want to try to point that out because that's a plus. That's a handle we can grab a hold of. Incorrect responding triggers the tantrum, sensitive to failure. Okay, he's engaging in those verbal vocal protests, the withdrawal. He's difficult to re-engage. That's important. This is not a kid who re-engages easily. So once you've lost him, you pretty much lost him. So if that's true, what is one of the really key issues in developing the behavior plan? Yeah, this is going to be a preventative, proactive plan. This is not going to be a responsive plan. That's not good. It's not good because we're not particularly good at that. Reactive plans are so much easier to trigger because the teacher can actually wait for the kid to have a problem. Then that will remind the teacher that they've got to do something. And it's a much easier kind of a plan to get a teacher to buy into. A proactive plan is a tougher plan. I'm going to have to put better teacher supports in a proactive plan. Okay? Consequences, what happens when he tantrums? It shuts down. So what happens in essence? He escapes. The behavior is successful. Okay? But the F then is somewhat effective as a prevention. All right? I don't know why this was not in the packet. I mean, it's in your packet, but it wasn't in this original. What does this piece of data tell us? And yours looks a little different because I just put this in there and it's not quite formatted right. When he displays a tantrum, we see teacher categories in terms of he's reprimanded, he gets redirected, he gets timed out, or there's no response or planned ignoring. So what's happening here from the teacher standpoint? Stay consistent. You will almost, again, always find them. All right? So one of the problems is that oftentimes people want to see this every time, or they don't believe it's a function. Actually, not having it every time is sometimes far more powerful. Because again, what does an intermittent reinforcement do? Strengthens the behavior. So in fact, when teachers are not consistent, you've really got a tougher nut to crack. All right? The kid has now learned, I'm not going to get this response every time, but I get it every now and then. It's worth hanging into.
I had an issue with on that same sheet of the task description, because we have a child here who really doesn't even have beginning sounds, and we're asking him to write 5 sentences and correct them. So I wonder about the appropriateness of the task.
Okay. All right. Good point. In fact, probably, I'll come back over here in the light and spend the dark over here. One of the things that should be coming into your focus is the fact that if I am escaping, right? And the last, you've seen that these tantrum behaviors result in this kid being able to escape or avoid. It's a pretty effective behavior. One of the questions starts to become, what's he escaping? What's he avoiding? What's going on here? What am I looking at? Okay? When you build the plan, that's going to be a critical aspect of the plan. I've got to somehow come to grips with it. So, is the part of the issue that this kid is being asked to do things he doesn't have the skills to do? Do we ever do that in schools? Huge. In fact, my experience has been, I would probably bet at least 6 of 10 FBAs that I do, the function, it plays a big part of the function is escape and avoidance. And they're escaping and avoiding work that, quite frankly, while they may have the skills to do, they don't believe they have the skills to do. And in many cases, they don't have the skills to do. All right? Anything else we're seeing here? In that inconsistent behavior on the part of the teacher, what happens at least sometimes?
Peer disapproval or response.
All right? From the peers, he gets a little bit of peer disapproval.
Time out for 5 minutes.
Okay? What is that? Okay. So what is that?
Ask him what he wants. He's alone for 5 minutes. He doesn't do work.
Okay. Do we ever do that? Do we ever use a consequence that actually reinforces the behavior? Okay. Suspension, expulsion. All right. Timeout. Sent to the office. I'm out of here. I'm happy. In many cases, the teacher's happy. Because here's this kid who's having a temper tantrum. If I send Rollin down to the office, I don't have to worry about his behavior anymore. I'm happy. He's happy. He doesn't worry about math anymore. We're both happy as a clam. Who's upset? The principal. Right? He's kind of going, why is this kid in my office? All right. So, what about no response or planned ignoring? Yeah.
Well, I just think in general, teachers don't like to use that because they're like, we can't have this child, especially because it's disruptive. So I don't think they like to do that too often. I was going to ask if you were going to choose one of those interventions, then you're saying it's more important to have something consistent so that you would get the same response for everyone who's
function of his behavior? Okay. If I ignore him, is that going to help? No. If I time him out, is that going to help? If I redirect him for the same task, is that going to help?
I would think that would, but I haven't seen him reading here that he's
Okay. Well, number 2 is redirection. So the teacher is, the second time he did it, the third time he did it, the fifth time he did it, she's redirecting him. Okay? So, let's see here. We'll pick on somebody new. I'm moving again. This was the move. Terrell. Right? Terrell can't read. I said, would you read the first paragraph? Or I give her the handout and she can't read it. What is she going to do with that handout when I hand it to her? She's going to look at it, right? Because students are stupid. So they look at it. Now, is that going to help her read it? No. So she'll look at it for a little bit and she'll realize I can't do this. What's going to happen? A little bit later, she's going to start screwing around, right? What am I going to do if I'm a typical teacher? Terrell, get to work. What's Terrell going to do? She's going to look at the paper. That's all she needed was for me to tell her to read, and now she can read. Right? We redirect, and kids aren't dumb, so they go, oh, yeah, okay. All right? I still can't read it, so I'm going to look at it for a little while, and then pretty soon I'm going to start screwing around again. And then the teacher's going to go, Tara, come on. And one of us is going to ultimately get tired of this game. Either she's going to get tired and say, you know what, this is a bunch of crap. Or I'm going to say, I've had it with you, young lady. I'm not here to just keep telling you. I'm not talking for my help, you know. Right? And off we go. But oftentimes redirection, that's not going to help unless what I'm redirecting the student to is something they can do. So in essence, quite frankly, if escape and avoidance is the issue, and we decide that part of what he's avoiding is the fact that he can't do the work, none of these interventions are appropriate. Okay? So it's not just a matter of pick one and be consistent. You got to pick the right one and be consistent. And so anytime you give a consequence, or I look at a consequence, that part of the FBA where it says what's been tried before, as you write down what's been tried before, ask yourself, what does that mean the person who did it thought the function of the behavior was? So when Carol does it, she can use the computer. What did I think the function of the behavior was? To get to the computer. Does that make any sense? No. So look and say, that's part of why you're kind of looking at that, kind of saying, what are we seeing here? And what is it saying? And what traps did we fall into?
What is it? My opinion is that oftentimes, like last year, I was working, testing bilingual children. You don't hear that. And over and over again, as I tested a kid and talked to the teacher and observed the child, it seemed to me that the child actually did not know how to do the work that the teacher was asking him or her to do. And at no point along the way did the teacher ever stop and test out whether the child actually could do the work. And that was true for a lot of teachers, some of whom were pretty good. And I could not understand that.
Part of it falls down into the fact that we teach teachers very differently. We teach special education teachers to look at individual students, individual strengths and concerns. We teach elementary education teachers to look at a class as a whole. So did I teach this? If I taught this, you should know this. We teach secondary education teachers to teach subjects. They don't even remember they're teaching kids in many cases, okay? Now, it's not that we, and again, you know, there's times I think we try to make schools not work, we couldn't do a better job. If we really set out to design it that way, we'd never get it that way. But then we get these people saying, now work together. So oftentimes, I will ask myself as an elementary education teacher, did I deliver a good